All right, so I'm currently on the phone with Katie. She's another one of the musicians that reached out about the current interview series. So I'm going to go ahead and give her the chance to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Katie. I play the violin. I actually have two violins. One is modern, the other is Baroque. I like experimenting with all kinds of different styles of playing. I was based in New York for about 12 years. I'm now between places, I guess, between the West Coast and the East Coast. I've been doing stuff on both ends and just been enjoying this very chaotic year.
Sure. So earlier in this wave of interviews, I had the chance to interview your brother, and then he said that I should also interview you. So I have a little bit of knowledge about, how you grew up and everything. But for the sake of it, why don't you go into some detail about, when you first found music? What about it was inspiring to you and made you want to participate in it?
Sure. So, our parents do not play instruments. They're not musically inclined, but they appreciate classical music a lot. So apparently when I was a little kid in the car, my mom was playing records of, Mozart, Brahms, things like that. And I would sing along and conduct. And she thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I started on piano lessons when I was about 3 years old. And then a year or so later, I saw my cousin playing violin. It was one of her extracurricular studies when she was at Harvard. And I could not stop talking about it. Apparently, I was bugging my parents all the time. And they finally got me a violin just to shut me up. They're like, here's your violin. Please go away. And once I started taking lessons, my teacher actually sat down with my mom and said, your daughter has potential. You need to make sure she practices an hour every day. This is really important. And I think it scared the crap out of my mom because she was just like, what kind of kids do I have?
Mhm.
But she went along with it, made sure I practiced an hour every day because no kid wants to practice when they could go outside and play.
Sure.
And then eventually I found out about Curtis, and that was probably the one time I actually practiced without being told to, because I really wanted to go to this school where there are a lot of kids just like me. Who enjoyed music. In public school, it was a little bit lonely since a lot of kids didn't know what the violin was or didn't understand classical music at all. So getting into Curtis was definitely life changing. I went when I was about 14, spent 7 years there. And then I went to Stony Brook for 2 years to get my master's degree. And then I was at Yale for 3 years getting my artist diploma. And I spent an extra year there getting into the Baroque program with Robert Mealy, which is how I ended up with two violins. And now I currently freelance going back and forth between the two, which has been fun.
Awesome. So you kind of went into some information there about, doing private lessons and things like that. Did you only do private lessons, or did you engage in the regular school traditional curriculum for like concert band? They tend not to have string and instruments and marching band, but you never know.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of tricky because I was in Colorado when I first started my studies there, and there wasn't really an orchestra program in the elementary schools. But once I went to Texas, there was a little bit of an orchestra program with like 6, 7 kids maybe.
Mhm.
And we were both in Dallas, and then we moved to Houston. And so once I was in Houston, there was an orchestra program, but it wasn't quite at the level that I guess that was needed if I wanted to prepare for Curtis. So
Mhm.
it was fun to be in, but also I think was my heart was at another school by that point, and it was nice to have the orchestra program at school. I feel like maybe there should be more of it, just because it really helps with motor skills. And playing chamber music requires a certain skill set that you don't learn anywhere else. It's this awareness level of what's happening around you
Mhm.
in real time, which I think is, pretty crucial in the real world, to be honest.
Sure, definitely. So along those lines, once you did kind of find the vein of music that you wanted to participate in, did you find that you were able to explore that through school, or did you kind of have to step out of school to kind of look for how you wanted to participate in it?
Well, I was nerding a lot at home with recordings of Heifetz and Milstein and Oistrakh when, playing violin and things like that. And it was that was the lonely part, which is like when I went to public school and I would talk about these things, nobody knew what I was talking about. So
Hmm.
once I went to Curtis, or even when I went to certain music camps, I felt a little more like, oh, I have peers who understand these things.
Hmm.
So that's where I started to feel like I fit in, at least a little bit. And so I think it's tough with public schools because they have to cover so many different areas of education that maybe sometimes music doesn't always fit in, even though I feel like it should be necessary, but that's just my own experience.
Sure. And so you mentioned being inspired by another family member of yours and then also wanting to get into a particular school. But beyond that, what did you kind of feel your ambition and trajectory was for how you wanted to play violin in a professional setting?
Yeah, well, I knew for sure that I wanted to perform. Like there's something about getting on stage and sharing something, and there's such a rush of adrenaline to do that. And especially with the pieces that you're working on, like some of this music is just gut wrenching, or so in like there are certain pieces that make my heart beat faster every time I listen to them.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how many times I've heard it, and it's one of those things. I'm sure everyone has experienced certain moments where they're just like, everyone needs to know about this.
Hmm.
It's so moving. It's just unlike anything else on this earth, and you just feel like everybody should know about this. Everyone should experience this at least once, and
Hmm.
that need to share it, I think, is kind of what drove me in this profession in particular.
Okay. So, with sharing being kind of your main goal there, were you looking for smaller ensembles to play with, or did you have your, eyes set on like state orchestra programs? Give a little bit of detail there.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, I was doing a lot of student recitals as a kid, which I think was helpful experience wise. Once I went to Yale, I they had me put together a chamber group for my graduation recital. Like we each had to do a chamber music piece on our graduation recital as part of a requirement. And I happened to put together this quartet because I wanted to do Bartok, and it was such a hit that my teacher came backstage and said, "If you guys don't stay together, I'm going to kill you." So we stayed together for a bit. We ended up winning a couple competitions like Concert Artists Guild and Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center 2, and just had all these opportunities falling into our laps. It was a little bit insane how quickly we were getting things as a group.
Hmm.
So, I spent a good 7, 8 years in a string quartet performing a lot. And that comes with its own set of that comes with a different set of skills that
Hmm.
one needs to acquire. It also comes with a very demanding schedule, and also a need to understand how to interact with other people. So I think it's really, really difficult to be in a string quartet. Anyone who's in a string quartet will tell you it's really, really hard. And you do need to have the right mindset. You need to have the right goals. You need to have
Hmm.
the right you need to have the same set of values as a group of
Hmm.
people. Like if what you think is important is extremely different from what the others may think is important, you're going to have a really, really hard time going forward. So there needs to be a shared vision in the
Hmm.
group. So, but I think we had a good run. It was about a 7, 8 year relationship with that group, which I learned a lot from. And then it was time to sort of move on and grow into something else. And so, once I stepped down from that role, I started freelancing a lot of solo things. I got into Astral Artists, playing a lot of solo recitals through them,
Hmm.
and then playing in a lot of other different chamber groups. Sometimes I would step in for another violinist who suddenly couldn't play a quartet concert, for example. So I've
Okay.
subbed for a lot of violinists in a lot of quartets, as a result of the experience of having played in a quartet for so long,
Hmm.
and that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay, and so you mentioned there that eventually you did step down and started freelancing. Where do you kind of feel you're at now? What do you want to be involved in, and where do you want to see your career develop into?
That's a really good question. I would say, even during the quartet days, I was also running a nonprofit called Quadlibet Ensemble. Quadlibet is Latin for whatever,
Hmm.
because I really liked the idea of a group named Whatever. And the idea was to have players who understood the difference between historical performance and modern performance, and mostly players who were just really open minded and wanted to get their creative juices flowing. It was meant to be sort of a playground for artists. But nonprofits are really, really difficult to get and maintain. And
Hmm.
so, you need to fundraise, you need to sell tickets, you need to do marketing, you need to do PR, all the other stuff that's not related to the actual art form. And so I had gotten shingles a few years ago from the stress of like
Hmm.
running the thing. So we're currently on pause while I figure out how I'm going to navigate it going forward. But I think the project idea is really good. Two of the members have their own nonprofit called Votes Art,
Hmm.
which brings music to places that don't have as much access, and also introduces voters' rights and registration, like awareness
Sure.
of voters' rights. And so we are partnering with them for any future projects going forward. That one of the last things we did was during the pandemic doing a video concert, which featured like a little QR code that you could scan and register to vote at any point during the show.
Awesome.
And yeah, so just things like that. I thought it'd be really neat to think about projects that incorporate issues that we really care about, that
Hmm.
also can be integrated into the art form that we're pursuing.
Yeah, that's
So that's
a great
yeah,
message to be out there promoting.
yeah, yeah. And the pandemic threw so much in the air, and I'm sure a lot of artists can relate that, when there were no concerts and there was no sign of like when concerts may start up again, I was questioning my existence. I mean, having done it all my life and suddenly not being able to do it, I just thought, what am I,
Sure, definitely.
Yeah. And things have started up again, but it's pretty chaotic, and I don't want to forget that I went through that difficult time, just because like you never know when it's going to happen again.
Yeah. I think that was
Yeah.
kind of a general message that a lot of people came out of the pandemic with is they found themselves in their free time kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So, with the amount of time that you've been involved in music, what are some of your favorite memories that stand out that have really, stuck with you and motivated you?
I think well, I remember when I was at Yale and I was, asked to put together a small group to play at one of their like fancy house concerts for the school.
Hmm.
And we were just doing background music. It was like a cocktail party, I think. And when I was going in to set up, like there were policemen outside, there were dogs sniffing my bags. There was like high security clearance to get in there. And I
Hmm.
thought, whoa, this looks serious. And there was the housekeeper who was really excited, saying that someone famous was coming. And I was like, okay. And so I'm playing with the group, the guests come in, and then I see Tony Blair and Paul McCartney.
Oh, nice.
And they come over and they shake my hand. I shook hands with Paul McCartney. I was so stoked.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, I told my mom later. She called me 12 times that night. She's like, I can't believe you shook hands with Paul McCartney. I just called your aunt, and she can't believe it either. She called each and every family member and then had to call and tell me again. I can't believe you shook hands with Paul McCartney. Yeah.
Nice, very cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to put out there? I mean, I understand, meeting Paul McCartney kind of makes the rest of them seem a little trivial, but all memories are important.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, oh, this one's funny. So when I was doing that extra year at Yale, entering the Baroque program, I was also TA assistant for Robert Mealy, who was running a Baroque class. And so in that class, everyone has secondary instruments. It's, violin, viola, cello, whatever, fitted with gut strings
Sure.
and tuned to A415. And gut strings are a different animal. They're very, very difficult to handle if you're not used to it, which no one in that class was. So you had about 2.5 hours of really out of tune, squeaky, scratchy playing, and it's very exhausting, and it was just not good. Morale was so low by the end of that class. And you see Robert Mealy sitting there looking totally defeated. And, it was one of those things where you could not find anything positive to say. So he sits there. And then after a little sigh, he says, "Yay, music."
Nice.
Which is one of my favorite. To this day, I still think about it. Yay, music. Like when there's nothing else.
Yeah, if you can't say anything nice.
Hooray for music. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. So, where can people find stuff that you have put out there, what you've been a part of, and, what you're hoping to put out?
Yeah, well, I have, which thanks for reminding me, I actually need to update it. I have my website. If you Google Katie Hyun, it should come up there. And I also have my Instagram, Katie Hyun VLN, short for violin, which you can find. And that's kind of just where I put up memories of stuff that I've done and things that I am doing now that I'm traveling a lot more now. So, yeah, once in a while I'll put up in my stories like a little video of the airport I'm at and have people guess what it is. And it's fun. Yeah.
Very cool. So with these interviews, I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So just a message that you want to put out there that you feel you resonate with.
Oof. It would have been a lot of different things years ago, but after the pandemic, it's really changed stuff up. I mean, I'd say for me, and maybe this will resonate with other people too, I've just accepted the fact that life will be chaotic. And somehow I have felt calmer by accepting it. This year is going to be chaotic, and I'm ready for it, I think. Even if I'm not, it's going to happen. So